The stars looked the same as they always did. But Captain Daniel Harper felt something different in the air. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, had been traveling through empty space for weeks. The crew was getting tired of seeing nothing but darkness and distant suns. They were explorers, meant to find new things. But lately, there had been nothing new to find. Daniel sat in his captain's chair, watching the screens in front of him. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. But he didn't care. Amy Sanders, his pilot, was humming softly as she checked the navigation systems. She was good at her job. Maybe the best pilot he had ever worked with. Behind him, Greg Palmer was studying some readings from a nearby star system. Everything was normal and boring. Then the alarm sounded. Amy's hands moved quickly across her controls. She stopped humming. Greg looked up from his work with wide eyes. Daniel felt his heart speed up just a little. After weeks of nothing, something was finally happening. "What is it?" Daniel asked, standing up from his chair. Amy pointed at her screen. "There's a signal coming from that moon over there. It's a distress beacon, Captain. Someone needs help." Daniel walked closer to look at the screen. The moon was small and gray, orbiting a massive gas giant. It looked dead and cold. Not the kind of place where anyone would want to be. But the signal was clear and strong. Someone was down there, and they were in trouble. "How long has the beacon been active?" Daniel asked. Greg checked his instruments. "Maybe 2 days. The signal is weak but steady. Whatever it is, it's still working." Daniel thought for a moment. They were explorers, not a rescue ship. But they were also the only ship in this area. If someone needed help, they had to try. It was the right thing to do. "Take us down, Amy. Let's see what we can find." The Horizon's Edge changed course, moving toward the small moon. As they got closer, the ship's sensors picked up more information. There was something on the surface, something made of metal. It was small, probably an escape pod, or maybe a shuttle. The landing was smooth. Amy was too good to make it anything else. Daniel gathered his crew. Besides Amy and Greg, there was Kyle Bennett, their medical officer, and Lisa Morgan, who kept the ship's engines running. They were a small crew, but they worked well together. "Kyle, Lisa, you're with me. Amy and Greg, stay with the ship and keep scanning. If anything goes wrong, I want you ready to lift off immediately." They put on their environment suits and left the ship. The moon's surface was rough and covered in a thin layer of frozen gas. The gravity was light, making each step feel strange. In the distance, they could see the crashed pod. Smoke or steam was rising from it, creating thin clouds in the weak atmosphere. As they got closer, Daniel could see the damage. The pod had hit hard. Its hull was torn open in several places, and scorch marks covered the metal. Whatever had happened, it had been violent. "Be careful," Daniel said to his team. "We don't know what's inside." Lisa had her scanner out, reading the pod's systems. "There's still some power, but not much. Life support is barely working. If there's anyone inside, they won't last much longer." Kyle moved to the pod's door. It was stuck, bent from the crash. Daniel and Lisa helped him pull it open. Metal groaned and screeched as they forced it aside. Then, they saw what was inside. 3 small creatures huddled together in the corner of the pod. They were covered in dark fur that seemed to shimmer in the light. Along their backs, Daniel could see glowing lines, like someone had painted them with light. The creatures were small, maybe the size of young human children. They had large eyes that watched the humans with fear. Kyle knelt down slowly, trying not to scare them. "They're just babies," he said softly. Daniel felt his stomach drop as he recognized what they were looking at. He had seen pictures in the Galactic database. Every human who traveled in space learned about dangerous species, and these creatures were at the top of that list. "Those are Velcron," Lisa whispered. Daniel knew she was right. Velcron were famous across the galaxy, but not in a good way. They were predators, hunters, and killers. Adult Velcron were nearly 3 meters tall, with claws that could tear through metal. They had destroyed entire colonies. Other species feared them, and for good reason. But these were not adults. These were children, scared and alone. The largest of the three made a soft sound, something between a whimper and a chirp. It looked at Daniel with eyes that seemed too intelligent, too aware. The creature was hurt. Daniel could see blood matting its fur. "Captain, we should leave," Lisa said. "You know what these things become. We can't take them with us." Daniel understood her fear. It was logical. It made sense. But when he looked at the three small creatures, he didn't see monsters. He saw children who needed help. "Kyle, can you treat them?" Kyle looked uncertain. "I think so. Their biology is similar enough to other species I've worked with. But, Captain, are you sure about this?" Daniel wasn't sure about anything. He was making a decision that could put his whole crew in danger. The smart thing would be to leave, to report the pod's location, and let someone else deal with it. But he couldn't do that. He couldn't leave children to die, no matter what species they were. "We take them with us. Get them on the ship, and do what you can for them." Lisa started to argue, but Daniel raised his hand. "I know it's dangerous. I know what they might become. But right now, they're just scared kids who need our help. We're taking them." The crew worked together to carefully lift the 3 Velcron cubs. They were surprisingly light, and they didn't fight or try to bite. They seemed too weak and too frightened to resist. As Daniel carried the smallest one, it made soft sounds and pressed against his chest. It was warm, and he could feel its heart beating fast. Back on the ship, Kyle set up the medical bay to treat their new passengers. Amy and Greg stared in shock when they saw what had been rescued. "Captain, those are Velcron," Greg said, stating the obvious. "I know what they are," Daniel replied. "Right now, they're patients. We'll figure out the rest later." The first 3 days were the hardest. The Velcron cubs stayed in the medical bay, and Kyle barely left their side. He treated their wounds and made sure they had food and water. The problem was that nobody really knew what Velcron cubs needed. The Galactic database had information about adult Velcron, about their weapons and their attacks, but almost nothing about their children. Daniel visited the medical bay every few hours. He wanted the cubs to see him, to know that he was there. At first, they pressed themselves into the corner whenever anyone entered. Their eyes would glow brighter, and they would make low sounds in their throats. But they never attacked. They just watched and waited. The largest cub was female. Daniel started calling her Kira, though he had no idea if she understood names. She was the bravest of the 3, always positioning herself between her siblings and the humans. When Kyle brought food, Kira would take it first, testing it before letting the others eat. The male cub was smaller than Kira, but more energetic. Once he started feeling better, he couldn't stay still. He explored every corner of the medical bay, touching everything with his small, clawed hands. Daniel called him Ren, and the name seemed to fit his curious personality. The smallest cub was another female, and she was the most scared. She rarely moved unless the others did. Her fur was lighter than her siblings, almost gray instead of black. Daniel named her Sola because she reminded him of someone who needed protection from the world. She had big eyes that followed Daniel wherever he went in the room. On the 4th day, something changed. Daniel entered the medical bay to find Ren playing with a medical tool Kyle had left on the counter. The cub was turning it over in his hands, examining it from every angle. When Ren saw Daniel, he didn't hide. Instead, he held up the tool, as if showing it to him. "You like that?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice soft. Ren chirped and waved the tool. It almost looked like he was trying to communicate. Kyle noticed the change too. They're getting more comfortable. Their vital signs are stable now. They're going to survive. "That's good," Daniel said, but he knew surviving was just the first step. They still had to figure out what to do with 3 Velcron cubs on a human exploration ship. Lisa Morgan came up with the solution. She was an engineer, good at solving problems. "We have that empty cargo section in the lower deck," she told Daniel one evening. "I could modify it, make it livable for them, set up the right temperature and atmosphere, give them more space than the medical bay." Daniel approved the plan. For the next week, Lisa worked on converting the cargo section into a habitat. She studied what little information existed about Velcron homeworlds and tried to match those conditions. The result was a large room with soft lighting, a warmer temperature than the rest of the ship, and several raised platforms where the cubs could climb. When they moved the cubs to their new home, Daniel was nervous. What if the cubs didn't like it? What if they felt like they were being put in a cage? But when the cubs entered the habitat, their reaction surprised everyone. Kira made a sound that almost seemed happy. Ren immediately started exploring. Even Sola looked less frightened. Cubs, Greg Palmer, the science officer, spent hours observing the cubs. He set up cameras in the habitat and watched how they behaved. What he saw fascinated him. The cubs played together, chasing each other around the platforms. They groomed each other, using their claws gently to clean their fur. When one got tired, the others would curl up next to it. "This doesn't match what we know about Velcron," Greg told Daniel. "Adult Velcron are solitary. They don't form social groups. They barely tolerate each other. But these cubs are acting like a family. Maybe that's because they are a family," Daniel said. As the days passed, the cubs became more trusting. They started responding to their names. When Daniel called Kira, the large cub would look at him. Ren came when called, eager for attention. Sola took longer, but eventually she would approach too. Kyle had an idea about communication. He took a computer tablet and modified it with a simple interface. The tablet had pictures and symbols that could represent basic needs: food, water, play, sleep. He showed the cubs how to tap the symbols with their claws. At first, the cubs just hit the screen randomly, but Kira figured it out within 2 days. She tapped the food symbol when she was hungry. Then she showed Ren, and he learned too. Sola watched her siblings carefully before trying it herself. Soon, the cubs were using the tablet to communicate all sorts of things. They would tap the play symbol when they wanted attention. They used the sleep symbol when they were tired. Greg added more symbols, including ones for each crew member. The cubs learned to ask for specific people. Daniel found himself spending more time in the habitat than anywhere else on the ship. He would sit on the floor, and the cubs would come to him. Kira liked to lean against his side. Ren would climb on his back, perching on his shoulders. Sola would sit in front of him, just watching his face with those intelligent eyes. One evening, Daniel was sitting with the cubs when Sola did something unexpected. She reached out with one small hand and touched Daniel's cheek. Her claws were retracted, and her touch was gentle. Then she made a sound, a soft rumbling that seemed to come from deep in her chest. It sounded almost like a purr. Kyle, who was watching from the doorway, smiled. "I think she likes you, Captain. The feeling is mutual," Daniel said, and he meant it. Amy Sanders was the last crew member to really accept the cubs. She had been scared of them at first, worried about what they might do. But one day, she came to the habitat to find Ren trying to reach something on a high shelf. The cub was jumping, but couldn't quite make it. Amy walked over and lifted Ren up. The cub grabbed what he wanted, a toy ball Lisa had made, and then looked at Amy. He chirped happily and patted her arm with his hand. From that moment, Amy was won over. "They're not monsters," she told Daniel later. "They're just kids. Strange-looking kids, but still just kids." The crew started documenting everything. They recorded the cubs' behavior, their communication, their social interactions. Greg compiled reports that showed how different these cubs were from what the galaxy believed about Velcron. "We're seeing something no one else has seen," Greg explained during a crew meeting. "These cubs are forming emotional bonds. They show affection, curiosity, and even empathy. When Sola is scared, Kira comforts her. When Ren gets tired from playing, the girls lie down with him. This is learned behavior, which means Velcron aren't naturally violent. They become violent because of how they're raised. Lisa nodded. So if we raise them with kindness, they might never become the monsters everyone fears. Exactly, Greg said. Daniel knew this information was important. It could change how the galaxy viewed an entire species. But he also knew it would cause problems. The galaxy had spent centuries fearing Velcron. Changing that fear wouldn't be easy. After 2 months in space, the Horizon's Edge needed to dock at Gateway Station for supplies. Gateway was a large space station that served as a trading hub for dozens of species. It was also where ships reported their findings to galactic authorities. Daniel made a difficult decision. He decided to keep the cubs on the ship, but to file an official report about finding them. He also filed a declaration of guardianship, claiming legal responsibility for the cubs as their protector. It was a bold move, and he knew it might cause trouble. The trouble came faster than expected. As soon as the Horizon's Edge docked, station security contacted Daniel. They wanted to inspect his ship. They wanted to see the Velcron cubs. Word had already spread through the station that a human ship was harboring young predators. Daniel allowed the inspection but stayed with the cubs the whole time. The security officers were nervous. They kept their distance, watching the cubs through the habitat window. Kira, sensing the tension, gathered her siblings close to her. One security officer, a tall alien with blue skin, shook his head. "You're insane, keeping these creatures. When they grow up, they'll kill you all." The message from the Galactic Council arrived 3 days after the inspection. Daniel read it alone in his quarters, his hands gripping the tablet tighter with each word. The Council demanded that he surrender the Velcron cubs immediately. They were to be transferred to something called the Velcron Containment Authority, an organization Daniel had never heard of before. He did some research. The Velcron Containment Authority was dedicated to controlling the Velcron population across the galaxy. They tracked adult Velcron, monitored their movements, and sometimes eliminated them if they were deemed too dangerous. Daniel felt sick reading about what they did. They didn't care about individual Velcron lives. They only cared about keeping other species safe. The Council's message said a representative would arrive at Gateway Station within the week to collect the cubs. Refusal to comply would result in criminal charges and the seizure of his ship. Daniel had a choice to make, and he didn't have much time to make it. He called a crew meeting. Amy, Kyle, Lisa, and Greg gathered in the common room. Daniel told them about the Council's demand. He watched their faces as they processed the information. "What are you going to do, Captain?" Amy asked. "I want to know what you all think first. This affects everyone on this ship." Lisa spoke up immediately. "We can't give them up. You've seen how they are. They're not dangerous. They're just babies who lost their parents." Greg nodded in agreement. "The data we've collected proves that Velcron aggression is learned behavior, not instinct. If we hand these cubs over to a containment authority, they'll either be imprisoned for life or killed. Either way, we'll never know what they could become." Kyle was quieter. He looked at his hands before speaking. "I'm a doctor. I took an oath to protect life, to do no harm. Those cubs are alive because we saved them. Giving them up to people who see them as things to be contained rather than lives to be protected goes against everything I believe in." Amy was the last to speak. "I was scared of them at first. I thought keeping them was crazy. But I've watched Ren follow you around like you're his father. Captain, I've seen Kira protect her siblings. I've heard Sola purr when someone holds her. They're not weapons. They're children. If we give them up, we're telling the galaxy that some lives matter less than others based on what species they are. I can't do that." Daniel felt pride swell in his chest. His crew wasn't just good at their jobs. They were good people. "Then we're all in agreement. We keep the cubs, and we don't surrender them to the Council. They'll come after us." Greg warned. Once we refuse, we'll be fugitives. I know, Daniel said. But I'd rather be a fugitive who did the right thing than someone who handed innocent children over to people who want to lock them up forever. The council's representative arrived exactly 1 week later. His name was Vex Tral, and he was a Kalith, a species with 4 arms and skin that looked like it was made of polished stone. He came with 6 armed security officers and a legal document that gave him authority to take the cubs by force if necessary. Daniel met him in the station's conference room. He left his crew on the ship with instructions to seal the doors and prepare for departure if things went badly. Vex Tral was not friendly. He sat across from Daniel, with all 4 arms folded, his expression cold. Captain Harper, you are required by galactic law to surrender the 3 Velcron juveniles currently in your possession. Their continued presence on your vessel represents a clear danger to you and your crew. With respect, they represent no danger at all, Daniel replied. We've had them on board for 3 months. They've never shown any aggression. In fact, they've shown the opposite. They're affectionate, curious, and intelligent. Vex's Tral made a dismissive gesture with one of his hands. What they are now is irrelevant. Velcron biology dictates what they will become. When they reach maturity, their predatory instincts will emerge. They will become violent, uncontrollable, and lethal. This is not opinion, Captain Harper. This is scientific fact. ATAS. ATS. Is it? Daniel leaned forward. Because my science officer has been documenting their behavior, we have 3 months of data showing that these cubs are capable of forming emotional bonds, learning communication, and displaying empathy. We have evidence that Velcron nature isn't fixed at birth. They become what they're taught to be. Your evidence is meaningless, Vex Tral said. You have observed infant behavior. All species appear harmless as infants. The issue is what happens as they mature. You cannot control that process. You are playing with forces you do not understand. I understand that 3 children lost their parents and nearly died alone on a frozen moon. I understand that we saved their lives. And I understand that I'm not giving them up to an organization that sees them as problems to be solved, rather than lives to be protected. Vex Tral's expression hardened. Then you are in violation of galactic law. I am authorized to take custody of the Velcron juveniles, with or without your cooperation. Daniel stood up. Then you'll have to take them by force. And I'm telling you right now, that won't happen without a fight. You would risk your career, your freedom, and your crew's safety for 3 animals? They're not animals. They have names. Kira, Ren, and Sola. And yes, I would risk everything for them, because it's the right thing to do. Vex Tral stood as well, his 4 arms unfolding. You are making a grave mistake, Captain Harper. The Council will not tolerate this defiance. You have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, my security team will board your vessel and remove the juveniles by force. Daniel returned to the horizon's edge and told his crew what had happened. They had 1 hour to decide if they really wanted to go through with this. 1 hour before they became criminals in the eyes of the galactic community. We should let people see them, Lisa suddenly said. The cubs. If everyone could see how gentle they are, maybe public opinion would change. Greg's eyes lit up. She's right. We have all that video documentation. We could broadcast it across the station's network. Show the galaxy what we've been seeing for 3 months. It was a risk. But Daniel approved the plan. Greg quickly compiled a message that included video footage of the cubs playing, communicating with the tablet, and interacting affectionately with the crew. He showed Kira gently grooming Sola. He showed Ren learning to use the tablet to ask for Amy. He showed all 3 cubs curled up together, sleeping peacefully. The message included a statement from Daniel, explaining what had happened. He talked about finding the orphaned cubs, about choosing to save them rather than leave them to die, and about what they had learned in 3 months of caring for them. He ended with a simple question. If these cubs had been any other species, would the galaxy demand they be taken away and locked up? Greg broadcast the message across every channel on Gateway Station. Within minutes, it was spreading beyond the station, jumping from system to system across the galactic network. Millions of beings watched the footage of the Velcron cubs acting nothing like the monsters everyone feared. Reactions were mixed. Some supported Daniel, calling him brave for standing up to the council. Others called him foolish and dangerous. But everyone was watching. For the first time, the galaxy was seeing Velcron not as faceless predators but as individual beings with personalities and emotions. The hour passed. Vex Trawl and his security team approached the horizon's edge. Daniel stood at the airlock with his crew beside him. The cubs were in their habitat, unaware of what was happening. They were playing with toys Lisa had made, their glowing markings bright with contentment. Captain Harper, you have refused to comply with the Council's directive, Vex Trawl announced formally. I am hereby authorized to board your vessel and seize the Velcron juveniles by force. You're not stepping foot on my ship, Daniel said firmly. The security team moved forward, weapons drawn but not aimed. They were trying to intimidate, not kill. But before they could reach the airlock, alarms started blaring across the station. A voice came over the station's communication system. It belonged to Commander Patricia Wells, the station's human administrator. All security forces, stand down immediately. There will be no forced boarding of any vessel docked at this station without my direct authorization. Vex Trawl's eyes widened in anger. Commander Wells, you are interfering with official Galactic Council business. I'm protecting the sovereignty of vessels docked at my station, Patricia's voice replied. Captain Harper's broadcast has caused quite a stir. Half the species representatives on this station are demanding the Council reconsider its position. The other half are threatening to leave if the cubs are taken by force. I'm not starting a diplomatic incident over 3 cubs who appear to be no threat to anyone. This is outrageous, Vex Trawl said. This is politics, Patricia countered. Captain Harper, you have clearance to depart immediately if you wish. I suggest you take it. Daniel didn't need to be told twice. Amy, get us out of here. Best speed. The crew rushed to their stations. Within minutes, the horizon's edge detached from Gateway Station and accelerated away. Vex Trawl could only watch as the human ship escaped with its illegal cargo. In the habitat, the cubs felt the ship's engines engage. Kira chirped a question through the tablet. Ren scampered to the window to watch the stars. Sola stayed where she was, playing with a soft ball, unaware that her existence had just caused a galaxy-wide controversy. The first week of running was the hardest. Daniel pushed the horizon's edge to its limits, jumping from system to system, never staying in one place long enough for anyone to track them. The crew worked in shifts, with someone always monitoring the scanners for pursuit ships. They all knew the Galactic Council had resources that far exceeded their own. Amy proved her worth as a pilot during those early days. She found routes through asteroid fields that bigger ships couldn't follow. She used gas giants' gravity wells to mask their engine signatures. She kept them one step ahead of their pursuers through skill and sheer determination. The cubs sensed something was wrong. They became quieter, more clingy. Kira stayed close to the habitat door, watching for crew members. Ren stopped playing as much, and Sola barely left her siblings' sides. They couldn't understand what was happening, but they felt the tension in their human family. Daniel made time to visit them every day, no matter how busy he was. He would sit with them, and they would gather around him like always. Kira would lean her weight against his side. Ren would climb onto his lap. Sola would press her face against his hand, seeking comfort. I'm sorry, Daniel told them one evening. I'm sorry your life has become so complicated, but I promise, we'll figure this out. Kira touched the tablet, tapping the symbol for safety. Then she tapped Daniel's symbol. The message was clear. She felt safe with him. That simple gesture made all the danger worth it. 3 weeks into their flight, they received a message from an unexpected source. It came from a human colony world called New Haven, located in the outer territories where council authority was weaker. The colony's governor, a woman named Helen Burke, had seen Daniel's broadcast. She was offering them sanctuary. It's probably a trap, Greg warned, during the crew meeting. Maybe. Daniel agreed. But we can't run forever. We need fuel, food, and supplies. We need a place to rest and figure out our next move. Kyle looked worried. If it is a trap, and they take the cubs, we won't get another chance to escape. I know the risks, Daniel said. But Helen Burke has a reputation for standing up to the council. Her colony has sheltered refugees before. I think we can trust her. Amy plotted a course to New Haven. The journey took 5 days. During that time, the cubs grew bigger. They were developing quickly, their bodies changing as they matured. Kira was now large enough to reach the high platforms without jumping. Ren's claws were longer, sharper. Sola's luminescent markings were brighter. They're entering adolescence, Kyle explained. This is when most Velcrons start showing aggressive tendencies, according to the database. We need to watch for behavioral changes. But the changes they saw weren't what the database predicted. Kira became more protective. Yes, but not aggressive. She watched over her siblings with careful attention, making sure they ate properly and rested enough. Ren became more curious, wanting to explore beyond the habitat. Sola grew braver, sometimes leading play activities instead of just following. Lisa installed a new feature in the habitat, a door that the cubs could open themselves using the tablet. It connected to a secure corridor that led to other parts of the ship. It was a test, letting them have more freedom, seeing if they would abuse it. The first time Ren opened the door on his own, he stepped into the corridor and looked around with wonder. Then he walked carefully to the engine room where Lisa was working. He sat down and watched her, fascinated by the tools and machinery. He didn't touch anything without permission. When Lisa showed him a safe tool, he held it carefully, turning it over in his hands to study it. He's never been taught not to break things or hurt people, Lisa told Daniel later. But he's naturally careful. He asks permission with his eyes before touching anything. That's not trained behavior. That's just who he is. New Haven appeared on their screens like a promise of safety. It was a modest colony with about 50,000 residents, mostly humans with some friendly alien species mixed in. Helen Burke met them personally at the landing pad. She was a tall woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. Captain Harper, she greeted him with a firm handshake. You've caused quite a stir across the galaxy. Not intentionally, Daniel replied. Helen smiled. The best revolutions never are. Come on. Let's get you settled. And I want to meet these famous cubs of yours. Helen's reaction to the cubs surprised even Daniel. She entered their habitat without fear, sat down on the floor, and waited. Kira approached first, suspicious and protective. Helen held out her hand, letting Kira sniff it. Then Kira did something she had only done with the crew before. She rubbed her head against Helen's palm. Well, aren't you a sweetheart? Helen said softly. Ren and Sola came over next, curious about the new person. Within minutes, all 3 cubs were comfortable with her. These are the monsters everyone's afraid of? Helen asked with disbelief in her voice. They're precious. New Haven became a temporary home. The colony kept the Horizon's Edge's location secret, and Daniel's crew finally got some rest. The cubs flourished with the change. The colony had a park with real grass and trees, maintained under a protective dome. Lisa built a portable habitat unit, and they took the cubs to the park every day. Watching the cubs experience grass for the first time was magical. Kira touched it carefully, then pressed her whole body into it, rolling around with what seemed like joy. Ren ran in circles, chasing flying insects. Sola found a patch of flowers and sat among them, her luminescent markings glowing in harmony with the flower colors. Other colonists came to see the cubs. Most were curious, some were nervous, but none were hostile. Children especially loved the cubs. Ren played gentle chase games with human kids, always careful not to hurt them, even though he was getting stronger. The cubs learned that not everyone feared them, that they could exist in the world without being seen as threats. But peace never lasts forever. 2 months after arriving at New Haven, sensors detected approaching ships. 3 council patrol vessels had found them. Helen immediately contacted Daniel. "They're demanding we hand you over," she said. "I'm refusing, but they have the firepower to take you by force if they want to." Daniel gathered his crew. They were out of options. They couldn't outrun 3 patrol ships, and they couldn't fight them. Surrender seemed inevitable. Then something unexpected happened. The colonists of New Haven took to the streets. Thousands of them surrounded the landing pad where the Horizon's Edge was docked. They linked arms, forming a human barrier. Children held signs supporting the cubs. Adults chanted messages of protection. Helen Burke stood at the front of the crowd, speaking into a communicator that broadcast to the patrol ships. "If you want Captain Harper and those cubs, you'll have to go through every single person on this colony. We don't recognize the Council's authority to take innocent beings and lock them away. Those cubs have done nothing wrong. They've brought joy to our children and taught us that fear is a choice, not a requirement." The patrol commander tried to negotiate, but Helen refused to back down. The standoff lasted for 3 days. During that time, the story spread across the galactic network. More colonies voiced support for Daniel. Some alien species, particularly those who had suffered under Council heavy-handedness, began questioning the Council's authority. On the 3rd day, Daniel made a broadcast that would reach billions of beings across the galaxy. He brought the cubs with him. By now, Kira, Ren, and Sola had learned enough words to communicate beyond just the tablet. Kyle had taught them basic speech using a computer program designed for language learning. "My name is Daniel Harper," he began. 3 months ago, I found 3 dying cubs on a frozen moon. I could have left them there. That would have been the safe choice, the smart choice. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't let children die just because their species has a bad reputation." He gestured to the cubs beside him. Kira sat calmly, her intelligent eyes watching the camera. Ren was still, his usual energy contained for the moment. Sola pressed close to Daniel's leg, seeking comfort. "These are Kira, Ren, and Sola. They're not monsters. They're not weapons. They're children who have known nothing but kindness from the moment we found them. They play. They learn. They love. They're gentle with human children half their size. They ask permission before taking things. They show concern when someone is hurt or sad." He let the cubs speak for themselves. Kyle had prepared them for this. Using the speaking device, Kira's voice came through, processed and slightly mechanical, but understandable. "We love our family," Kira said slowly. "Humans saved us. Humans good. We not hurt anyone. We want stay with family." Ren spoke next. "Why people scared? We not scary. We play. We learn. We happy with humans." Sola's voice was softest. "Please not take us away. We love Captain Daniel. We love Amy and Kyle, and Lisa and Greg. They, our family. Please." The broadcast changed everything, but not in the way Daniel expected. While millions of beings across the galaxy watched and debated, something else was happening in the shadows. Messages started arriving on the Horizon's Edge, encrypted and cautious. They came from scientists, anthropologists, and even a few politicians who had been quietly questioning the Council's approach to Velcron for years. One message particularly caught Daniel's attention. It came from a Velcron researcher named Dr. Melinda Grant. She worked at the Institute for Xenobiology on Earth itself. Her message was direct and surprising. "Captain Harper, I've studied Velcron biology for 20 years. What you're doing proves a theory I've held for decades, but could never test. The Council has refused to allow any study of Velcron child rearing because they believe Velcron nature is fixed. But nature is never fixed. Every species is shaped by environment and experience. I have colleagues who feel the same way. We want to help you. More importantly, we want to study your cubs, with your permission, and their well-being as the priority. Please contact me. Daniel discussed it with his crew. Greg was excited about the scientific possibilities. Kyle saw potential for medical advancement. Lisa worried about exposing the cubs to more attention. Amy pointed out they needed allies with real power, not just public sympathy. If we can get Earth's scientific community on our side, the Council will have a much harder time painting us as reckless criminals, Greg argued. Daniel contacted Dr. Grant. What followed was weeks of careful negotiation. Earth's government was technically part of the Galactic Council, but humans had always been somewhat independent in their thinking. The Council couldn't just order Earth to hand over the cubs without causing serious political problems. A deal was reached. Daniel would bring the cubs to Earth. They would participate in a comprehensive study at the Institute for Xenobiology. In exchange, Earth would officially grant them refugee status and protection. The cubs would be free, not imprisoned. The study would be voluntary, not forced. The journey to Earth took 2 months. During that time, the cubs continued growing. Kira was now nearly as tall as Kyle when she stood upright. Her strength was impressive. Once, when a cargo crate was stuck, she helped Lisa move it with ease. But she was always careful, always gentle. Ren's curiosity had evolved into something more focused. He spent hours watching Greg work with the navigation computers. Greg started teaching him about star charts and planetary systems. Ren absorbed information like a sponge, his intelligence evident in how quickly he learned complex concepts. Sola remained the quietest of the three, but she had developed a special gift. She seemed to sense when crew members were upset or stressed. She would seek them out and simply stay near them, offering comfort through her presence. Kyle called it emotional intelligence. Daniel called it kindness. Earth appeared on their view screen like a blue and white jewel. Daniel felt emotions swell in his chest. He hadn't been home in over a year. The cubs pressed against the windows, their glowing markings brightening with excitement. Home, Kira said through the speaking device. She had learned that word recently. CB. 1B. 1B. Yes, Daniel replied. Home. Landing at the Institute for Xenobiology was surreal. Media from across the solar system had gathered. Thousands of people lined the landing area behind barriers, some holding signs of support, others protesting. Daniel saw signs that said, "Protect all children," and others that said, "Velcron are dangerous." Dr. Melinda Grant met them personally. She was older than Daniel expected, probably in her 60s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She looked at the cubs with fascination, but not fear. Captain Harper, it's an honor. And you must be Kira, Ren, and Sola. She addressed the cubs directly, treating them as individuals, not specimens. Kira chirped a greeting. Ren waved shyly. Sola hid partially behind Daniel, but watched Dr. Grant with curious eyes. The Institute had prepared a special facility for them. It wasn't a cage or a lab. It was more like a large apartment, with observation equipment discreetly installed. There were comfortable beds, recreational areas, and, most importantly, no locks on the doors. The cubs could leave whenever they wanted. The study began gradually. Dr. Grant's team was careful not to overwhelm the cubs. They started with simple observations, watching how the cubs interacted with each other and with Daniel's crew. That it is not a Klein, and in Ravity. They documented play behavior, communication patterns, and social bonding. Then they introduced new experiences. They brought in other children, carefully screened volunteers whose parents understood the situation. The meetings were supervised, but not controlled. What happened amazed everyone. The cubs played with human children as if they were just another type of sibling. When a young boy fell and scraped his knee, Sola immediately came over, with concern evident on her face. She made soft sounds and gently touched the boy's shoulder. When the boy's mother came to help, Sola stepped back but stayed close, watching to make sure the boy was okay. Kira organized group games, using her tablet to explain rules to both cubs and children. She made sure everyone got a turn, that no one was left out. When arguments arose, she would position herself between the arguers and make calming sounds until they settled. Ren shared things he had learned with the human children. He showed them star charts on his tablet, explained about different types of planets, taught them words in the simple language the cubs were developing. The children were fascinated, asking endless questions that Ren patiently answered. Dr. Grant documented everything. She compiled reports showing that Velcron cubs raised with love and social interaction developed empathy, cooperation, and communication skills that rivaled or exceeded many other intelligent species. She showed that their supposed natural aggression never appeared when violence wasn't modeled or encouraged. The implications are staggering, she told Daniel during one of their meetings. If Velcron aggression is learned, rather than innate, it means we've been wrong about them for centuries. It means the entire Velcron problem could be solved not through containment, but through education and integration. Will the Council accept your findings? Daniel asked. Dr. Grant looked uncertain. Some will. Others will reject it, no matter how much evidence we provide. Fear is powerful, Captain Harper. It makes people cling to beliefs, even when those beliefs are proven wrong. She was right. The Council's response to the study was divided. Progressive members saw it as an opportunity to fundamentally change how the galaxy dealt with Velcron. Conservative members called it dangerous propaganda, insisting that the cubs were just young and their true nature would emerge as they fully matured. The debate raged for months. During that time, something else was happening. Other Velcron cubs were being found. Some were orphans like Kira, Ren, and Sola. Others were young enough that their parents surrendered them voluntarily, hoping they could have better lives. Daniel found himself at the center of a growing movement. With Dr. Grant's help, he established the First Contact Sanctuary, a facility dedicated to raising Velcron cubs using the methods that had worked so well with his three. The sanctuary was funded by donations from across the galaxy, from beings who believed change was possible. The first new cubs arrived 6 months after Daniel reached Earth. There were 5 of them, rescued from a destroyed colony ship. They were scared, traumatized, and aggressive at first, but Kira, Ren, and Sola helped integrate them. The 3 original cubs showed the newcomers that not all beings were threats, that trust was possible, that family could be chosen rather than just inherited. Watching Kira comfort a frightened new cub, using the same gentle touches Daniel had used on her months ago, was deeply moving. She was teaching what she had been taught. She was passing on love she had received. The sanctuary grew. Within a year, it housed 20 Velcron cubs of various ages. None showed the violent aggression that was supposedly inevitable. Instead, they formed a community. They learned together, played together, and supported each other. Adult Velcron from across the galaxy began paying attention. A few reached out, cautiously and secretly. They spoke of rigid traditions in Velcron culture, of child-rearing methods focused solely on creating warriors and survivors. They spoke of wondering if there could be another way. One adult Velcron, who identified herself only as Echo, managed to visit the sanctuary. She came disguised and heavily armed, expecting danger. What she found instead shocked her. She watched cubs playing organized games with rules they had agreed upon. She saw them using tablets to communicate in multiple languages. She observed them caring for a sick cub, taking turns keeping him company. And when Kira approached her, showing no fear despite Echo's intimidating appearance, Echo broke down. "I did not know we could be this," Echo said through a translator. "I was raised with violence and hunger. I learned to survive, to fight, to never trust. I thought that was what we were, but these cubs show something different. They show what we could be. Echo's visit was documented and shared across Velcron communication networks. It started conversations that had never happened before. Young adult Velcron began questioning their culture's methods. Some older Velcron, scarred by centuries of violence, began wondering if peace was possible for their species. The Galactic Council could no longer ignore what was happening. The sanctuary's existence proved that Velcron didn't have to be threats. The cubs raised there were living evidence that the species could change. Public opinion had shifted so dramatically that the council faced pressure to revise its policies. A formal hearing was scheduled. Daniel was called to testify before the full Galactic Council. He would have one chance to make his case, to argue for a new approach to Velcron. The stakes couldn't be higher. The night before the hearing, Daniel sat with Kira, Ren, and Sola in their sanctuary habitat. They were no longer cubs, really. They were adolescents, nearly adult-sized but still young in their behavior. They gathered around him like they always had. "Tomorrow is important," Daniel told them. "I have to convince a lot of people that you deserve to be treated fairly, that all Velcron deserve a chance to be more than what fear expects them to be." The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Circular rows of seats rose up like an amphitheater. With the speaker's platform at the center, Daniel stood on that platform, feeling small and exposed. Above him, thousands of eyes watched from faces of every imaginable shape and color. Vex Tral was there, sitting with the council's enforcement division. He looked at Daniel with cold satisfaction, clearly expecting this hearing to end with punishment and vindication of his position. Other council members showed various emotions. Some looked curious, others hostile, a few sympathetic. The High Arbiter, an ancient being from a species Daniel didn't recognize, called the hearing to order. Her voice echoed through the chamber with surprising power. "Captain Daniel Harper, you stand before this council accused of harboring dangerous beings in violation of galactic safety protocols. You have refused multiple lawful orders to surrender Velcron juveniles into proper containment. How do you answer these charges?" Daniel took a breath, steadying his nerves. "I acknowledge that I kept the cubs and refused to surrender them. But I reject that my actions endangered anyone. I saved 3 dying children and gave them a home. That's not a crime. That's basic compassion." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vex Tral stood, his forearms gesturing dramatically. "Compassion without wisdom is dangerous. The captain speaks of children, but Velcron are not like other species. Their biology makes them inevitable threats. His compassion, while perhaps well-intentioned, will lead to tragedy when these juveniles mature and their true nature emerges." "Their true nature?" Daniel challenged. "I've lived with Kira, Ren, and Sola for over a year. I've watched them grow. I've seen their true nature. And it's nothing like what you describe." The High Arbiter raised a hand for silence. "Captain Harper, this council has reviewed Dr. Melinda Grant's study. While interesting, it documents only young specimens. The council's concern is what happens as they mature. Can you guarantee these Velcron will never become violent?" "Can you guarantee any child will never become violent?" Daniel countered. "Human children, Qualith children, children of any species, can become violent if raised with abuse and trauma, but raise them with love. Teach them better ways, and most become good people. Why should Velcron be any different? Why should Velcron be any different?" "Because their instincts drive them toward predation and violence," another council member argued. "This is not learned behavior but biological imperative." "Then why haven't Kira, Ren, and Sola shown these instincts?" Daniel asked. "They're adolescents now, nearly full-grown. According to your theories, they should be displaying aggression. But they're not. They're gentle, cooperative, and kind." They play with human children half their size and never hurt anyone. Anomalies, Vextral said dismissively. Statistical outliers that prove nothing about the species as a whole. Then explain the other cubs, Daniel said. The sanctuary now houses 20 Velcron juveniles of various ages. None show the inevitable aggression you claim is biological. Some came to us traumatized and defensive. But with patience and care, every single one has learned to trust, to communicate, to form bonds. That's not anomalous. That's proof of potential. The High Arbiter consulted with other council members in quiet conversation. Then she spoke again. Captain Harper, we will hear testimony from Dr. Melinda Grant. Then we will hear from the Velcron themselves. This council will make its decision based on evidence, not emotion. Dr. Grant was called forward. She presented her findings methodically, showing video documentation, biological scans, and behavioral analysis. She explained how Velcron brain structure allowed for remarkable adaptability, how their capacity for learning exceeded most species, and how their social behaviors mimicked those of the beings around them. In essence, Dr. Grant concluded, Velcron are mirrors. They reflect what they experience. Raise them with violence, they become violent. Raise them with love, they become loving. Their biology doesn't determine their behavior. Their environment does. This is theoretical speculation, Vextral protested. It's documented fact, Dr. Grant replied firmly. I have over a year of continuous data from multiple subjects. The evidence is conclusive. Very teen. When the body, then came the moment Daniel had been waiting for. The High Arbiter announced that the cubs themselves would be allowed to address the council. It was unprecedented, allowing beings so young to speak in such a formal setting. But the council had agreed that the cubs deserved to speak for themselves. Kira, Ren, and Sola entered the chamber. They moved with confidence but not aggression, their luminescent markings glowing softly. The sight of them caused immediate reaction. Some council members tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Others leaned forward with curiosity. A few simply stared in shock at seeing Velcron behaving so calmly. The cubs approached the speaker's platform. Kira stepped forward first, her speaking device in her hand. She had practiced this speech with Daniel for days, but now, the words were entirely her own. My name is Kira, she began, her processed voice clear and steady. I am Velcron. You fear my species. I understand why. Adult Velcron have hurt many. They destroy and kill. But I am not them. I have never hurt anyone. I do not want to hurt anyone. She paused, looking around the chamber at all the watching faces. When I was small cub, my parents died. I was alone with my siblings on Cold Moon. We were dying. Then humans found us. Captain Daniel could have left us. That would be safe choice. Instead, he saved us. He gave us food, made us warm, protected us. He showed us that not all beings are threats. Ren spoke next, his voice more energetic. I learned so much from humans. I learn about stars and planets. I learn about different species and cultures. I learn that universe is big and full of wonder. But most important, I learn that being strong doesn't mean being scary. Captain Daniel is strong because he protects those who need help. That is strength I want to have. Then Sola, the smallest and quietest, stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but her words carried power. I was most scared of all cubs. I hid from everything. But humans never forced me. They waited. They showed me trust is safe. Now I'm not scared anymore. Now I help other cubs who are scared. I show them what was shown to me. This is what Velcron can be. Not monsters, not weapons. Just beings who want to live and learn and love. The chamber was silent. Even Vextral had no immediate response. The cubs had spoken with intelligence, emotion, and sincerity that no one could deny. The High Arbiter spoke carefully. Young ones, This council appreciates your testimony. But we must ask a difficult question. As you grow older and stronger, how can we be certain you will not become dangerous? How can we trust that your peaceful nature will remain? Kira thought about this, then answered, You cannot be certain. Same way you cannot be certain about any young being. But you can choose. You can choose to give us chance and support us, or you can choose to fear us and lock us away. If you choose fear, you prove that you are more dangerous than we are. Because we have never hurt anyone. But you want to hurt us just for being born Velcron. The truth in Kira's words hit the chamber like a physical force. She had exposed the fundamental problem. The council feared Velcron for what they might do, not for what they had done. They wanted to punish these cubs for crimes committed by others of their species. That wasn't justice. That was prejudice. A council member from Earth, Ambassador Chen, stood to speak. This hearing reveals a difficult truth. We have operated on assumptions about Velcron nature that may be fundamentally wrong. We have treated an entire species as irredeemable based on the actions of adults who were themselves raised in violent cultures. Captain Harper and these cubs offer us a chance to break that cycle, to create a new path where Velcron can be integrated into galactic society as productive members rather than contained threats. It's too risky, another member argued. If we're wrong, if their nature does emerge, the consequences could be catastrophic. And if we're right? Ambassador Chen countered. If we continue treating Velcron as monsters, we guarantee they will become monsters. But if we treat them as beings capable of growth and change, we might end centuries of conflict. Isn't that worth the risk? The debate continued for hours. Daniel watched from the side, with his crew and the cubs beside him. He couldn't read how the council would decide. Some members seemed convinced by the evidence and testimony. Others remained locked in fear and tradition. Finally, the High Arbiter called for a vote. The resolution would determine not just the fate of Kira, Ren, and Sola, but potentially the future of all Velcron. The vote was counted. For agonizing minutes, the chamber was silent as results were tallied. Then, the High Arbiter announced the decision. By a vote of 312 to 207, the Council has decided to establish a provisional Velcron integration program. Captain Harper will be cleared of all charges. The cubs in his care will be granted full legal personhood status. The First Contact Sanctuary will receive official recognition and funding. Other Velcron juveniles found or surrendered will be eligible for placement in similar programs. Relief flooded through Daniel. The cubs chirped with joy, not fully understanding the legal implications but sensing the positive energy. The crew hugged each other, tears flowing freely. But the High Arbiter wasn't finished. However, this program will be carefully monitored. All Velcron participating will undergo regular psychological evaluations. Any sign of dangerous aggression will result in immediate review. This is a trial program, not a permanent policy change. The Velcron must prove themselves worthy of this opportunity. It wasn't perfect, Daniel knew. The cubs, and others like them, would live under scrutiny that other species' children wouldn't face. But it was a beginning. It was recognition that change was possible, that fear didn't have to dictate policy, that compassion could be part of justice. Years passed after that pivotal hearing. The First Contact Sanctuary grew into a full educational institution. Hundreds of Velcron cubs were raised there, learning not just survival skills but art, science, philosophy, and cooperation. Each graduating class proved that Velcron raised with love could contribute to society in peaceful, productive ways. Kira became a teacher at the sanctuary, helping newly arrived cubs adjust. Her natural protective instincts, channeled into nurturing rather than fighting, made her perfect for the role. Cubs who came traumatized and afraid found safety with her. Ren pursued studies in astrophysics, his childhood fascination with stars becoming a career. He worked with Amy Sanders on exploration missions, his Velcron strength and human-taught values making him an ideal explorer. he discovered 3 new habitable worlds, which were open to multi-species colonization. Sola became a counselor, specializing in trauma recovery. Her gentle nature and deep empathy helped countless beings, both Velcron and others, heal from psychological wounds. She proved that Velcron capacity for violence could be transformed into capacity for healing. Daniel continued running the sanctuary, though his role evolved. He became less of a caretaker and more of an ambassador, traveling the galaxy to speak about what he had learned. He met with Velcron communities, encouraging them to reconsider their child-rearing practices. Some listened, some didn't. But slowly, gradually, change began. 20 years after finding those 3 dying cubs on a frozen moon, Daniel stood in that same sanctuary where it all began. He was older now, gray showing in his hair. Kira stood beside him, fully grown and magnificent. No longer a scared cub, but a confident adult who had never known violence as a way of life. "Do you remember when we first met?" Daniel asked her. Kira's speaking device had been upgraded over the years. Her voice through it sounded more natural now, more distinctly her own. "I remember being cold and scared. I remember thinking we would die. Then I remember warm hands lifting me. I remember feeling safe for first time in my life." "Are you happy?" Daniel asked. "With how your life turned out?" Kira looked around the sanctuary, at the cubs playing under careful supervision, at the human staff working alongside adult Velcron who had been raised there. She saw a future her species had never imagined possible. "I am more than happy, Captain Daniel. I am grateful. You gave me life twice. Once when you saved me from dying. Second time when you showed me that life could be about more than surviving. You showed me life could be about thriving, learning, connecting, loving. You gave me and all Velcron here a gift beyond measure. You gave us hope." Daniel felt tears on his cheeks. He had started this journey thinking he was just saving 3 children. He hadn't known he would end up helping change an entire species' destiny. He hadn't known that one act of compassion could ripple across centuries of hatred and fear. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the greatest changes always started with simple choices. With seeing beings instead of species. With choosing love over fear. With believing that anyone, no matter how the galaxy had written them off, deserved a chance to be more than what others expected. The galaxy would never be the same because Daniel Harper had chosen to defend 3 predator cubs. And perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not someone who followed rules blindly, but someone who saw past labels to the individuals beneath. Someone who believed in possibility more than probability. Kira placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of affection she had learned from him years ago. "Thank you, Father. For everything, Father." The word made Daniel's heart full. He had never officially adopted the cubs. They were adults now, capable of independence. But the bond between them transcended legal definitions or biological facts. They were family, built not by blood, but by choice, trust, and love. And in that moment, looking at the sanctuary that had grown from a single act of compassion, Daniel knew with certainty that every difficult day, every threat, every moment of doubt had been worth it. He had changed the world, or rather, he had given Velcron the chance to change themselves. And they had taken that chance and created something beautiful. The future was still uncertain. Not all Velcron would choose the path of peace. Not all parts of the galaxy would accept them. But change had begun, and it couldn't be stopped now. One generation at a time. One cub at a time. The Velcron were becoming something new. Something better. And it had all started because one human captain had looked at 3 dying cubs and chosen to see children rather than monsters. Kira used her speaking device, her vocabulary now extensive. "You already convinced us, Captain Daniel. You showed us that being strong doesn't mean being violent. You taught us that family is built with trust. Whatever happens tomorrow, you already changed our world," Ren added. "And we will help. We will show them who we are." Sola pressed close to Daniel. We are not monsters. We are us. That enough. Daniel smiled, tears in his eyes. Yes, Sola. The broadcast went viral instantly. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched young Velcron express love and plead to stay with their adoptive family. The cub's words, simple and honest, carried more weight than any argument Daniel could have made. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Species that had always supported the Council's hardline stance on Velcron began questioning it. How could anyone watch those cubs speak and still believe they needed to be locked away? Online forums exploded with debate. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. The 3 patrol ships received new orders. They were to maintain position but take no action. The Council had lost control of the narrative. Instead of looking like protectors of galactic safety, they looked like bullies trying to tear children away from the only family they had ever known. In New Haven's park, unaware of the political storm raging across the galaxy, the cubs played in the grass. Daniel watched them with his crew beside him. They had won this round. But the fight was far from over. The Council would regroup and try again. There would be more confrontations, more danger. But for now, watching Kira chase Ren while Sola laughed in that strange chirping way she had, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt hope. Daniel sat in his captain's chair, knowing what came next. The Council would send ships after them. They would be hunted. But he had bought time, and public opinion was shifting. The galaxy had seen the cubs now. They had seen Kira's gentle nature, Ren's playful energy, and Sola's innocent trust. Where to, Captain? Amy asked, from the pilot's seat. Daniel thought for a moment. Take us to the frontier. We need to find friends and allies. This fight is just beginning. The horizon's edge jumped into faster-than-light travel, leaving Gateway Station behind. Somewhere in the galactic bureaucracy, orders were being issued. Ships were being mobilized. A manhunt was beginning. But for now, in the quiet hum of the ship's engines, 3 Velcron cubs played in their habitat, safe and loved, unaware of the storm brewing around them. Daniel met the officer's eyes. These creatures have names: Kira, Ren, and Sola. And they're not going to kill anyone because they're being raised with love, not violence. The officer didn't look convinced. He filed his report and left. But when he looked at the 3 cubs huddled together, scared by the strangers, he knew he had made the right choice. That night, Daniel sat in the habitat with the cubs. They were quiet, still upset from the day's events. Sola climbed into his lap, something she had never done before. She looked up at him with those big eyes, and Daniel felt a fierce protectiveness wash over him. I won't let anyone hurt you, he whispered. He had no idea how hard keeping that promise would be. As Kyle worked to save the cubs' lives, Daniel returned to the crash site with Lisa. They searched the pod's computers, looking for answers. What they found made everything more complicated. The pod's logs showed that the cubs' parents had been killed. The family had been running from something, fleeing across space. There were messages, fragmented and damaged, but clear enough. Someone had been hunting them. The cubs were survivors of an attack. Orphans, in the truest sense. Daniel stood on the moon's surface, looking up at his ship. Inside were 3 Velcron cubs who would never see their parents again. He had just made a choice that would change everything, though he didn't fully understand how much. The galaxy had rules about Velcron. There were protocols and procedures. Daniel had just broken all of them. But when he thought about those scared eyes and soft sounds, he knew he would make the same choice again.